problem isn't the A-League.
Yeah,
It's you.
yeah, exactly.
That 100% is the blueprint on how to stop the Jets' attack.
Some of the other players who've burst onto the scene out of nowhere and done crazy things.
So I think now everybody expects that every game, but that's not realistic.
Yeah, they suspect this is some hijinks from a player agent.
So there's no excuse anymore for managers.
That he's no longer in contention for this World Cup squad.
You're adamant that he didn't mean that.
I know you haven't been to a final before, but I have, so we'll do it.
That's the biggest catchment area in the country by far. So I think that there's no excuses not to do that.
I used to call him the Velvet Sledgehammer.
I don't think the way that it came about, it's possible for a footballer to think from where he was, how the ball's coming, I'm going to score this.
That is
To
true.
Messi.
There's no debate about that.
That's tough. I mean,
It's not that tough.
I remember meeting the Prime Minister, and my memory's that bad, I don't know which one. So,
Oh, that is special. Unbelievable. This, ladies and gentlemen, is football.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Total A-Leagues. I'm Vince Rugari, Tommy Orr, Alex Brosque are both here. It's half-time in the A-League Semi-Final, so to speak, one leg down. Boys, I don't know about you, I loved watching these games on the weekend, even though we didn't get the results or whatever, but in terms of games of football...
yeah. Well, I thought, to be honest, going into both games, I thought they were going to be pretty cagey affairs with so much on the line, but it was the complete opposite. I think all four teams had a real crack. There was so much attacking, entertaining football. Both games could have gone either way, so absolutely no complaints here.
it sets everything up for this weekend.
Yeah, as I said to you downstairs, Tommy, just before, if you like football and you watch these games, you didn't enjoy them, the problem isn't the A-League.
Yeah.
It's you.
Yeah, exactly.
You.
It's true.
And the good thing is we get to do it all again in front of packed houses,
Yeah.
Newcastle and Adelaide, so very excited about that.
Yep.
Brosque, can you kick us off, please, with your best moment of the first legs?
Yeah, my favourite moment out of the two games was Stammer getting his goal against his old club, the Jets. We probably didn't speak about that enough. We had Burgess up against his old club, but not a lot was made of this. And to be fair, it sort of, for me, sums up his time at Sydney. You know, it wasn't a well-created, finish or a bit of individual brilliance from him. It was a goal where he had to scrap to try and get. He had to use his body well. He knows the keeper's coming, about to take his head off, and still puts his body on the line. And that, like I said, sums up his time at the moment where he's having to scrap for everything at the moment. He's only got 3 goals in 13 games, which is not what we're used to seeing from him, but not a reflection on him at all. I think it's Sydney's inability to create chances for him.
I think you got to say, you just said it, but he used his body so well. He kind of forced the error from Delianov and Nata, just the way he kind of positioned himself and used all of his experience. So I think he had a good game. We spoke about whether he was going to start or not, and in the end, I think he repaid PK's faith in putting him in the starting lineup in that game.
Keep going, Thomas. What's your moment?
Yeah, for me, it has to be Eli Adams getting the Jets back into the tie. Clayton Taylor's run for this goal specifically. A little bit fortuitous towards the end, obviously, with the ricochet, but I think that overall in this game, Sydney FC did a very good job on these two players, but in that moment, they combined again. They've been so dangerous as a partnership this season, and despite being kept pretty quiet that whole game, it was a brilliant pass from Clayton Taylor for Eli Adams there, and well finished by Eli Adams. So got to say that was a good moment.
Good finish. Could have gone the chip, but has gone the chip into the roof of the net, which I much prefer. Very good. My moment is from the other game, Auckland-Adelaide, a cracking contest. And here it was, Lachlan Brook, a former Adelaide United product, proud South Australian boy. He's had a cracking season, and that's a textbook Lockie Brook goal. That's number 9 for him in 21 starts for Auckland this season. Very important for them. Obviously, they let the lead slip in the second half, and it was we'll get into this game shortly, boys, but very much a game of two halves here. Auckland dominated early, Adelaide came back late, and I think it's advantage Adelaide going into the second leg just because they got the home dynamic, and then Auckland players seem to be dropping like flies at the moment. But Lockie Brook is going to be loving this trip back home.
I think as well, he had such a good start to the season. I'm a huge fan of Lockie Brook, but I think that towards the end of the season, he did go a little bit quiet. He was starting to be used more off the bench. So to see him get a goal in Auckland's in such a big game for them, I think it bodes well for them going into the second leg.
Yeah, agreed. We'll start with the other game. Sydney 1, Newcastle 1, evenly poised here. I don't really know how... I think we all kind of expected a little bit that Sydney FC would be somewhat more defensive in this game a little bit. I think what we were expecting was Newcastle to play their usual game and Sydney to play the way they did against Victory and sort of have been a little bit under Patrick Kisnorbo. But that's not what happened here, Tommy. They dominated this game in all aspects, really, except the scoreboard.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that the first 10, 15 minutes, they surprised everybody. They were putting Newcastle under so much pressure. And to be honest, Newcastle hasn't really come up against teams that are willing to do that all too often this year. They gave them absolutely no time on the ball. And when they won the ball, they looked to break quickly. And I think that in this game, if Sydney FC had a little bit more killer instinct in the front third, they could have put this tie to bed, to be honest. They had so many openings where they would create a 3-on-3 or a 4v4 against Newcastle's defence just from sheer forcing mistakes. And you've got to say the work ethic of their young players, the likes of Akol Akon, Quintal, the two midfielders, they gave them not an inch in that first half in particular. And overall, I think that they caught everybody off guard. And I think that's the template that Sydney FC fans want to see as well.
Agree. That 100% is the blueprint on how to stop the Jets' attack. You know, you've got to get them where they're most vulnerable. And we've seen throughout the season, you know, the Jets, for all their attacking quality, conceded 40 goals now this season, which is, you know, it shows if you put them under pressure, you know, they're vulnerable to turning possession over, which we saw a lot in those clips there. Every time Sydney went forward and put pressure on, and then the midfield pushed on, defence pushed on, the Jets had no answer. You know, I think the one thing that they'll look at as a positive is the fact that with all of that, they still created one good chance and scored a very good goal, which kept them in the tie, I think. But that's the way Sydney has to play this second game as well.
Yeah. And if you mentioned the two midfielders, I'll include Quintal in that, but behind him you had Paul Ocon Jr. And Wataru Kamijo. They were outstanding and reflective of the changing face of Sydney FC, which is, you know, in years gone by, you've expected to see experienced players. You know, I think of Luke Bratton, Anthony Caceres in midfield, foreigners sometimes. Now you've got three kids, two from the academy, one from a lineage of Socceroos greats in terms of the Ocon family, and dominated this game in the middle of the park in terms of possession, but also physically as well, Tommy.
Yeah, I think you have to give PK a lot of credit for putting him in such an important game as well, because I think a lot of the Sydney FC fans have been crying out for this all season, and you have to fair play for PK for doing that. But Kamijo in particular in this game, obviously Ocon cops a lot of kind of plaudits for his displays, and rightly so, and he was fantastic again in this game. But I think Kamijo in this game as well, just for such a big occasion, a very young player, the maturity he played with, I don't think he lost the ball once that I can remember. And when the way that the game was so end-to-end, the midfield, the amount of work they had to get through just to cover the ground, to attack, to defend, it was like half-court basketball. Just you attack, we attack, you attack. The work rate of all defenders from both sides, Max Burgess as well, was phenomenal in this game.
Well, he wasn't bad either, Brosque, Maxi Burgess. We've spoken a lot about him this season, and even though the midfield for Newcastle, you would say, were beaten on the night, he had a pretty good game too.
He had a great game, but in a different way than what we're used to. We're used to seeing Burgess, you know, getting on the ball in that sort of sixth position that he's been asked to play, you know, more recently, or since, you know, Millsy moved him into that, and he's been fantastic. I think it speaks to the intelligence that he has as a footballer, his footballer IQ. You can play him anywhere on the field and he knows where he is, he knows where he needs to be. His ability to read the play and be in the right spots was fantastic, as we see here so often. But then for the Jets, and what we've seen throughout the year, is his ability then to turn defence and winning possession into attack. So I think Sydney did well in stopping him from doing that, but he was everywhere. Another great performance from Maxi.
When I see him, Tommy, especially this season, I think, like, imagine if you had the experience you're having now 5 years ago or earlier in your career, because previous coaches who've looked after or coached Max Burgess, he's always seemed like not the right fit for those coaches. I think those coaches were expecting him to be a finished product or wanted him to slot directly into whatever their plans were, and, you know, always copped a bad rap for his defensive contributions for whatever reason. And he goes under Mark Milligan and he fixes that part of his game, and it just looks like Mark Milligan has seen, righto, mate, you've got talent. I can see there's something here. How can I finish you as a player? Or how can I make sure that the best bits come out from you and contribute to the team?
And I think that the key that what Millsy's done with that is he's given him a really like a leadership role in the team and made him take ownership of it. And he, as you rightly pointed out, he's obviously identified the talent that he had, but he also, Maxi has to go and do the work. And I think that he's done that fantastically. He's really, as that number 6, I think if he didn't play in that game, the amount of attacks that Sydney FC had that he kind of snuffed out, he was always the man there. It doesn't matter what the Jets were doing, it always seemed to be Burgess as the right man in the right place. And you just have to give him so much credit, because it's so hard to kind of redefine yourself positionally and kind of learn new skills at his age, but he's done that, and put in performance like that. I mean, it speaks wonders about how much quality he has.
Yeah. Brosque, what do you think of the game by Eli Adams? Struggled early under this suffocation that we're talking about from Sydney, but obviously broke for the key moment for the game for Newcastle, and eventually came good, and we'll be hoping to bring that confidence into leg 2.
Yeah, I mean, he was potentially a little bit nervous. I mean, we spoke about that last week, about the occasion and how big this is, and how, you know, for all the regular season games and experience you've got in there, it doesn't count for much when it comes to big games, big atmospheres. But this shows that he's definitely got the quality. You know, he has produced at big moments all throughout the season. That's a big moment there, you know. Away from home, you're 1-0 down. You need that goal to keep your side in it. Otherwise, Sydney may be lift and potentially go on and get that second. And he delivered. So I think, you know, that'll give him a lot of confidence going into the second game. But, look, his quality is undoubted. We've seen it all year. His brilliance. And he's definitely a player that, you know, for Sydney and all the talk about their press, when they keep possession, which they did very well, you can't lose sight of where he is on the pitch.
Yeah, and I think you've got to say as well, Sydney FC, they did a remarkable job in this game with Clayton Taylor and Eli Adams on doubling up on them. Almost every single time they got the ball, whether it was Akon or Kispe on the other side, they worked back to make sure that they didn't have a one-on-one, because we know how dangerous they can be in those one-on-ones, and it's clearly something PK's identified as, you know, an avenue to goal for the Jets is those wide areas and the work rate the Sydney FC plays. They didn't allow them to kind of showcase their normal performances, I think.
Yeah. Akon had a quiet game in terms of attacking contribution, good with the press and all that, but I think that spot in an ideal world obviously goes to Joe Lolly if he's fit and available, and we saw him get a taste off the bench. Brosque, are you expecting, I mean, what do you think they've been doing with him? Have they been plotting to slowly bring him back with an eye to a more substantial role in this second leg, or do we just not know how fit he is?
I think that's the unknown at the moment. That, you know, only Sydney FC know how many minutes he's got in him. He travelled down to Melbourne in a do or die clash and didn't get on the park at all. So I think they're managing him to get the best out of him and make sure he doesn't break down again, which we have seen in past seasons. They pushed him a little bit too early, rushed him back, and he's broken down again. So far so good. I mean, he got a few 10-15 minutes off the bench, which was great, I think, for Akon. Look, I think he is the point of difference in that attack for Sydney. And I think they tried to isolate him one-on-one. I'd like to see him, and yes, there's a lot of pressure on him. He's a young kid, you know, we need to be aware of that. But I'd like to see him be a bit more direct. And hopefully Paddy brings a bit more out in him this week. And just when he gets the ball, be direct, go, create something, because he's got it in him to do it. And then Joe Lolly can come on when he does and do what he does.
To your point, I think Sydney FC is a different team when Lolly's on the pitch, aren't they? When he comes onto his left foot, it just feels like the whole field's opened up. The possibilities are much bigger for Sydney FC, but I completely agree with Brosque. I can imagine that they'll keep the same kind of template, and after 60 minutes, 50 minutes, you know, I think Lolly will come on to try and win them the game, essentially. Yeah,
the good thing about Akon is he's not a liability by any means. He's not as... I think we're all expecting him a little bit like some of the other players who've burst onto the scene out of nowhere and done crazy things. We're expecting him to do something mad at some point that'll break a game open.
Because he did in the first derby. When he came in, that's what happened. So I think now everybody expects that every game, but that's not realistic, I think. So,
But they can use his legs to press and run the opposition ragged and then introduce Lolly, as you say, at that important moment and potentially break open the game. On Paddy Kisnorbo, interesting stuff out of social media. I think a foreign reporter, the name escapes me at the moment, suggesting that Sydney FC are after a German coach who I think was a former teammate of Alex Brosque at Schalke once upon a time. The word out of Sydney FC on this connection is that there's nothing in it. Yeah. This is they suspect this is some hijinks from a player agent or a coach agent, I should say, who may have been guilty of another thing about 12 months ago on social media as well. It came from the same source. Right. So people are playing down the link. I don't think anyone knows, though, what the club's thinking in terms of Patrick Kisnorbo's future. I don't even know if Patrick Kisnorbo knows if he wants to do after this season. I mean, if he takes Sydney to a grand final win, bolt, right? And do something else, maybe. Rather than stay in a competition which you've already conquered and then came back at short notice and, done well again.
Well, I think he's already done well enough to earn more years if he wants them. That's my personal opinion. But as you said, I don't know the conversations that he's had with the hierarchy at Sydney FC. I think in these situations, open dialogue is always the best. If the agreement was always for him to come in for 6 or 7 games, do what he can, and then leave while Sydney FC looks elsewhere, that's fine. It's just about being open about the situation. And I think that's always in the best interest of all parties, including the fans, to be honest.
Agreed. Let's hear a little bit from his opposite number, Newcastle Jets coach Mark Milligan.
How much do you want it, and how much do your boys want it, especially next week at home? Yeah, absolutely, mate. Like I said, these boys have been fortunate to create a lot of special moments this year, but that chapter's closed now. We have a chance to go and, rewrite history books, and that just comes down to how hard we want to work this week, how much desire we have, and it's in our hands.
If the pressure of playing in front of that Sydney crowd in a first finals experience for many of these players weighed them down a little bit, do you think it's going to be the other way when they go back home and those vibes are positive and for them?
Yeah, I mean, anything can happen. We saw when Auckland beat the Jets towards the end of the season and when there was still neck and neck for the title race. You know, they haven't had it all their own way at home this season, the Jets as well. So Sydney FC will take hope from that. But at the same time, I think it is going to be a different prospect. If you look at their last performance in the F3 derby against the Mariners in the regular season at home, they blew them out of the water. That will be what they'll want to do, recreate again. And I think the first 30 minutes of this game is going to be crucial for Sydney. I think that not allowing the Jets to score 1 or 2 goals early and get it kind of a stranglehold of the game is going to be crucial. And the longer the game goes on, the better the prospects are for Sydney.
I agree. I think if Sydney follow that same game plan and manage to frustrate the Jets and their attack more so, that's when the crowd starts to get into the game and potentially the nerves start to kick in. But look, I think off the back of that 4-0 at home, that's a good memory that they have of their last match in Newcastle. I think the crowd is going to help. I think for the Jets, they've gotten through the hardest part, which is quite an intimidating atmosphere at Allianz Stadium, away to Sydney, who's a very good team. They'll be going home full of confidence, I think. But you're right. I mean, winning the premiership and then having to back that up and try and make sure they're in the grand final and go for that championship can be difficult. I think the Jets are well equipped to handle it.
Yeah. All right, to the other game, Auckland-Adelaide. Brosque, ignore the scoreboard that said 1-1. Who won this game, do you think, in terms of being positioned for the second leg?
For me, Adelaide, I think it sets them up perfect. Going back to Coopers now, they're going to be incredibly confident, and more so in the lead up to that game and how they've been going. An incredible run of form. I can't remember the numbers, something like 10, 11 games without tasting defeat. And regardless of whether they've scored first or had to come from behind, they're never out of games, And I think that's something that just works so well for them. In terms of the lineup and how they start, Jovanovic comes back into the squad, and we'll touch on what Andrioli does in that in a second. But I think either way, I think you've just got so many options. The way they're playing that free-flowing football, they also have probably gotten through the worst of it. Going to Auckland, managing to get something out of that game and set themselves up.
Yeah, Tommy, what do you do if you're Ed and Andrioli? Do you stick with Anselmo, who I thought had a really good game and combined really well with some of Adelaide's forwards, particularly Johnny Yole? Thought he had a terrific game. But then you got a young, hungry and rested Luka Jovanovic ready to go too. Yeah,
I think if it was me, I'd stick with Anselmo. We saw Jovanovic when he scored the 2 goals against Sydney a couple of weeks ago in the last game of the season. That was off the bench as well, so that shouldn't be understated. But Anselmo, he offers something different. I think his ability to hold up the ball. Every time Auckland was pressing in the second half, Anselmo had that ability to hold the ball. It was like an outlet where you could play more direct. Yeah. They can play through the lines, but when Auckland kind of locked on and pressed high, they had that outlet of his physical presence. He's always as a target in the box as well. Craig Goodwin's obviously back in the mix now, getting more minutes with his delivery. The likes of Yull as well, he was great in this game. I think him linking up as well with Anselmo was very dangerous. So if it was me, I'd probably be doing Anselmo for the first 60 and then letting Jovanovic run right.
Yeah, the experience I think that he brings as well, particularly in a young Adelaide team, just maybe binds everything together a little bit better in the final third. Not that that's a knock on Jovanovic in any way, but they might do what we were talking about with Akon and Lolly and sort of give one an early stint, as you say, and then bring on the young gun later on. Auckland wish they could have these sort of headaches in terms of selection because their blokes are dropping like flies. Guillermo Mai is out for sure. Cam Howison, I still don't know if we actually understand what happened with him in terms of was it a concussion, was it a poke in the eye, how bad is it? I guess we'll find out soon, but this is not what you want to see, Brosque, when you're Steve Corica on the eve of a second leg.
No, definitely not. And given the impact that he has had in games recently as well and the quality that he brings, this is a big loss. I think, Auckland and their attack there, they've got enough depth within the squad. I think, the addition this year of Brooke and Cosgrove has given them just so many different dimensions to their attack. But again, he's someone who has delivered often this season for them. And this one was obviously a little bit different. It was a poke in the eye, but he doesn't seem to be all that well in that moment, you know. So how he backs up from it and whether he's good enough is, again, just little things and little moments. And you do look to these things as being key when it comes into fixtures and who goes in with confidence and who doesn't.
I think another thing worth pointing out is De Vries was back on the weekend.
Yeah.
Obviously came off the bench, but that is a huge in as well. And Randall as well. I think he was probably a little more quiet than we're used to seeing him. He's always such a threat with his pace. But I think both of them, we can expect to see De Vries probably come back into the starting lineup in such a big match. And I think that they're a different team when he plays, to be honest. Callan Elliott, he's such a good defender. He's done a great job the last 2 weeks, but just going forward, that outlet with De Vries and Cosgrove in the middle, I think that's going to be a big kind of talking point in this game.
What about the battle between Yaya Dukuli and Hiroki Sakai? Interesting. Dukuli probably got the points just in terms of the moment that we see, well, not here, but coming for the goal. Beat him for pace and will probably give him some confidence heading into this second leg against, you know, a guy who's probably been one of the standout defenders in the league for the past 2 seasons. But what his benefits and all that, he's got plenty of that. But he doesn't have the pace he used to.
No, I think that we saw in the first half, I think Dukuli, there was a few times where he allowed Sakai to get close and kind of get into a physical confrontation with him, and you're never going to win that against Sakai. He's so strong. But in the second half, you saw in that moment, he always tried to give himself that extra bit of space. And also Adelaide was playing better. I think they probably gave him more service to use his pace. But when he's in those situations, 1-on-1 out wide, he's almost unstoppable. There's nothing you can do as a defender, someone who's that quick when they knock it past you and run. The thing that was impressive in that moment was the quality of his delivery, and Crawford at the back post was gambling. So it was a fantastic goal from Adelaide. But you kind of highlighted this for me last week, Brosque, going into this game, was Dukuli's actually been playing a lot of the game as a left back, which I think his talents as an attacker are a little bit wasted. So I expect to see maybe a little bit of a reshuffle in this game so that we can see moments like that more often from Dukuli.
Let's hear a little bit now from Auckland FC coach Steve Corica.
Yeah. You're a little bit negative, guys. I think you need to be a little bit more positive. Huh? We won last week. We drew this week. We win next week. It's into a final. I know you haven't been to a final before, but I have, so we'll do it.
Classic Steve Corica, right? Brosque, I used to call him the Velvet Sledgehammer. He had a way with the media and his words and all that, and I think he's just trying to let the Auckland media know that this is new to them, but not to him.
No, exactly. It's not all doom and gloom. I mean, yes, they didn't get the win, but this is, a tie over 2 legs. So they've left themselves a bit to do, and you would imagine going to Cooper's is going to be difficult, but nothing he hasn't faced, nothing his team hasn't faced before. So, again, they had a good season last year and missed out at this moment. So I think they're better for it, better in terms of, again, the depth and the quality they have for me. They're more than capable. I just think it'll be a tough ask in Adelaide.
Never lost to Auckland. To Adelaide, Steve Corica and Auckland haven't. So that's a good record. That kind of maybe a little bit of a psychological effect as well.
Indeed. All right, can't wait for those games, boys. It's going to be a great weekend on the couch watching these two play out. Looking forward to it. Let's talk a little bit now about the Socceroos. The way that this pre-camp in Florida is playing out is that Tony Popovich and Football Australia are announcing players who are joining in waves. So we had 8 last week, an additional 10 or so this week. We can see the names here, and in particular the ones who are in the A-League have the club names next to them. And I don't think anyone's surprised to see Aziz Behich and Patrick Beach there. Maybe a slight surprise, depending on how you look at it, that their teammate Marcus Yunus isn't there, is not in the mix. I would read that and say that he's no longer in contention for this World Cup squad, Tommy. Yeah,
I think that, it's all about arriving in this moment full of confidence as well. And if you look at some of the other names, as talented as those players are, the likes of Borello, he probably didn't have his best season for Lupley as well. So I can imagine that, if you're Yunus, you're probably a little bit frustrated at this, but at the same time, Popper's obviously backed himself to get these players firing and fit and ready before the tournament starts. So overall, obviously still 4 teams in contention. I'm hopefully see a few more A-League players get in there, but overall, I agree. I'm probably a little bit disappointed not to see Yunus included.
I think for what he can give as well, which is, in recent years we've seen Daniel Arzani try be that player who's consistently being called up and regardless of club form, because he's someone who can do something different. I think with Yunus and the way he finished the season, he's just got such great power, a good eye for goal as well. So, yeah, from our point of view, I guess, in looking at someone who can do something a little bit different, and given his age as well, great experience for him, he could probably feel hard done by that he's not there. But overall, the players that are starting to filter through are quite good.
Oh, I'm hoping as well with the Jets, obviously they've won 2, potentially going to get a treble. Eli Adams, Clayton Taylor, Max Burgess. I'm hoping that they get some representation as well. I think they would be deserving of it.
Yeah, Tony Popovich has had to already submit his 55-man long list to FIFA, which won't be released publicly. So anyone who's going to be in contention has to come from that list. Right. So you'd like to think for those Jets players, there might be 1 or 2 of them on there, even though they might be, in Popper's mind, 50 plus in terms of the rankings of the pecking order. Who else do we like from the A-League players who are in there to make it, Brosque? Personally, I think Mitch Duke is a real good shout when you consider some of the other names who are contending to be that backup striker to Mo Toure.
Look, Mitch Duke has delivered in that position before, so I think we know what we're going to get from him. And again, when you look at the way Popper plays, he's tried a few different plays in that number 9 role. There's no one better for the way Popper sets his team up, particularly in that first 50, 60 minutes of holding, try and scrap for something, get someone up there who can hold possession, win us fouls, get us out of trouble. I think he's possibly, outside of Toure, obviously, who gives us a bit more of a threat in behind and more goal scoring. Duke is someone who for 50, 60 minutes can battle out and get us something.
And to your point, I think you need those points of difference depending on what problem the game throws at you. You need to have different profiles on the bench and available to address whatever problem's happening. So Mitch Duke can do things that no other player can. And I think that his physical presence, as you said, he has to be there, I think.
Yeah. It'll be interesting. Let's just do a quick roundup of other A-League news that's happening at the moment. We've seen in recent days a whole bunch of players being released from both of your former clubs, although I think it was called Queensland Raw.
That's right.
Back in your day, Brosque. But basically half the squad has been let go. Brisbane Raw, here's the list. Some, I guess, big names in terms of what some of these players have done in the past. Ben Halloran, there comes to mind pretty quickly.
Yep.
Nick D'Agostino, of course, is in that Socceroos mix as well. We don't know if he's going to be, what his plans are for next season. He'll probably be heading elsewhere, probably back to Europe, I would imagine. But what this says to me, Tommy, is that the club is saying to Valkanis, you're not the problem.
Yeah, well, it's going to be a busy off-season, and to be honest, something needs to change. So if you're going to stick with the manager, you need to give him the tools. You need to put trust in that decision and give him the tools that he needs to make the changes he wants. The other way would have been to get a new manager, and all these players might have been handed a lifeline, but they've chosen that route, and they're going to have to make almost an entirely new squad. So for better or for worse, next season is going to be a very unrecognisable Brisbane Roar.
Yeah, and I think he's going to have to draw upon the youth talent that's in Queensland in a similar way to what Mark Milligan has done in Newcastle, because with the resources available to Brisbane Roar these days, I can't see them going out and making a massive splash.
Well, when you consider that Brisbane Roar has from basically Coffs Harbour to Cairns to Mount Isa, that's the biggest catchment area in the country by far. So I think that there's no excuses not to do that,
and
to be
the
honest.
second biggest state federation these days in terms of participants, I believe, as well, ahead of Victoria. So there's a whole lot there that they can bring through. Similar situation with Adam Griffiths re-signing for 2 years at Perth Glory, Brosque. That's a vote of confidence in him by the club. I'm not sure if they were canvassing any other options, but if they did, they've looked at them and they've thought the incumbent is our best candidate at the moment. Similar deal. It's, you have the steering wheel. We've backed you in. Must produce, because the Jets, and I think as we were talking about previously, the Mariners in previous years have shown it doesn't take much to get back up the table if you know what you're doing in terms of the players you bring in and the way you want to set up.
Correct, and the two teams that you mentioned there in Mills' Jets and the Mariners that won several championships. I mean, a lot of the players in those teams it was a team of basically players that had tried in other clubs, hadn't quite worked, ended up in those clubs, and it was a good manager who brought the best out in them. So there's no excuse anymore for managers using how much money clubs have and the types of foreigners that come in. That's argument is long gone. So I think there's no excuse for any team not putting in better performances than, say, what Perth did for the majority of this season. I like the fact that they're sticking with Griffiths to give him a chance and give him an opportunity to build this squad into what he wants it to be. You don't want a turnover of coaches every year. It doesn't signal any stability within the club. I think they made a decision in bringing him in, as they did with Valkanis, Brisbane. You want them to stick by that and give the manager the chance to do and fulfil what the potential they saw in him. But you're right. I mean, now it's time for both those clubs to start delivering.
Yeah. This next one's unconfirmed, Tommy, but Mark Natta is apparently reportedly heading to the Italian Second Division, Serie B, to Cesena, the club that is coached by Ashley Cole.
Wow.
Can't say I've seen him play. Can't say I know much about him as a manager, but what do you think about the fit of the league for Mark Natta, knowing what you know about him?
Yeah, I think it's obviously a good moment for him to explore opportunities, and if that's what comes up, he's had a great season. I think that this year what he's done well is he's always been good on the ball, but I think that defensively and physically he's always struggled against those kind of big number 9s, especially with crosses in the box, the likes of Cosgrove and these types of players, and he's going to face a lot of that over there. So he just needs to be ready and make sure he's up and prepared to face that, and something that he's come a long way with. But at the same time, it all depends on the manager, Brosque. And if you go over there and he has the full belief of the manager and the way he wants to play, that's one thing. But I think that getting the trust of the manager is the most important thing with any move.
Yeah. Let's hear a little bit now from some Newcastle Jets players. They're hosting a semi-final this weekend, so there's a perfect excuse to relive the Riley McGree scorpion kick moment. You can't see it enough. And some of their current players were actually there on the day.
And those fans in the active area can scarcely believe what they've seen.
Riley McGree, the Scorpion. I was sitting right where he came and celebrated. I think it's probably the best goal I've seen in my lifetime. Probably will be.
I remember being in the stands over in the eastern stand over there.
Definitely Riley McGree's scorpion kick. I was up in the stands, and just to see the Jets get to the semi-final, which was where that goal was scored, and then score that goal and make it to the final was just, it was unbelievable.
It's a pretty spectacular goal and no one really expected it, so when it went in...
Oh my goodness! Oh my goodness! Have you seen a more freakish goal in A-League history?
I don't think I've quite had that atmosphere playing yet, but hopefully we can see how we go this season.
Here's Dodson, shoots at Redmayne, and he makes it 1-0. The Premiers have the lead against their F3 derby rivals. Will Dobson with a wonderful strike, and they lead 1-0.
So those interviews were shot in pre-season. To see how we go this season, they say. I think pretty well, Will, as we welcome Nylene to the desk. Do you reckon he meant it, Riley?
So this is a debate we were having. I reckon he meant it. Brosque, you're adamant that he didn't mean that. Tell me why.
Not just Brosque.
And Tommy.
Don't look at me. Nah. Didn't mean it. I don't know. It was very instinctive. It's not to say that he thought, I'm going to scorpion kick this into the top corner. He just saw the ball and threw his legs at it and it went in. And I'm not detracting from it. It was one of the best, most memorable moments of A-League ever. I loved it.
I think Brenton Speed summed it up perfectly. It was freakish and an incredible goal. But I don't think he meant it. I don't think the way that it came about, it's possible for a footballer to think from where he was, how the ball's coming, I'm going to score this.
Well, fast forward a few years, Ben Garuccio, when he scored the scorpion kick, you said it's more impressive than Riley McGree. Is that because you think Ben's one was obviously he meant it?
It didn't look as spectacular, nowhere near, but I think the intent from Garuccio with when the ball was coming to him, he had more time to actually have an understanding of what he wanted to do.
It's more calculated.
Correct.
Yeah.
So I think he meant it, he was going for it, and he admitted it. I don't know why Riley hasn't been asked if he's meant it.
I'm sure he has. I've just forgotten what he said.
You would say yes, absolutely.
I dare say.
And robbed of a Puskas Award as well, I should mention.
That is true.
To Messi.
There's no debate about that.
Ridiculous. But that happened in the semi-final 2017-18. That was the last time Newcastle Jets hosted a semi at home at McDonald Jones Stadium, and the atmosphere was absolutely pumping. I mean, he scored that first goal for Newcastle to put them back on level terms. This was against Melbourne City, and then it was their hometown hero in Jason Hoffman who brought it home in the 74th minute to send them through to the grand final. Now, what happened after that, we won't mention for Jets fans. Didn't quite go their way, but these are scenes, Vince, that we've been now seeing return back to McDonald Jones Stadium. We'll see it again this weekend.
Yeah, can't wait. It's going to be so exciting, but I'm sorry, I'll go there because I can't look at the Newcastle Jets in this season without thinking about... I was there at the grand final. It was amazing. Everyone was expecting them to, carry on and win the title against the Melbourne Victory team that was in fourth. Hadn't really impressed that much that season. And then the VAR was broken.
Yeah.
Like, I still can't believe that. I still can't believe that happened.
I think, trying to be more positive around it. I think looking at
right,
the way that, looking at the way that, you see now that Will Dobson and all those boys talk about their memories of that. Now that the A-League's kind of maturing, we're getting these younger boys have these memories as kids of the A-League, and it's so nice that these stories are kind of happening. So hopefully there's kids watching them this weekend and they can do the same thing.
By the way, with the McGree goal, no one mentioned Daniel Georgievski getting the assist to the assist before it went to Riley McGree.
No one's talking about the assist for that goal.
He wouldn't even remember.
It's true.
Now, Adelaide United, last time they hosted a home semi-final was at a sold-out Cooper Stadium back in 2015-16. This is also, funnily enough, against Melbourne City. Poor Thomas Sorensen having a tough time there. But this was a 4-1 win. Bruce Jitte scoring an absolute cracker from outside the box. Vince, do you remember that happening?
I remember it very well. I also remember what happened after this as well. Adelaide Oval, 10 years ago, sold out, one of the great moments in South Australian football history. And there's nothing like Cooper's when it's full, so I'm so pumped for my Friday night.
And I think Adelaide's kind of, the aura around Adelaide this season is a little bit similar to that season, so they'll be hoping that history repeats itself for sure.
What is it like playing at Cooper Stadium? Archie Thompson on A-League's Download said it is the most intimidating atmosphere when it's packed. Do you agree with that?
Look, it is in a way because of how perfect the ground is set up and the stadium is built for football at the end of the day. We've got a lot of big stadiums which are generally half empty and don't sound the same, which, don't get me wrong, any stadium, Vince, you were saying it earlier, any stadium you play at that's full is going to have incredible atmosphere. But I think the size, how close the fans are to the field, Cooper Stadium full is quite an intimidating place.
Friday night at Cooper's guaranteed chaos and goals, but it is obviously finals time. Both those games locked at 1-1, so it means potential penalties, potential extra time drama. So I'm curious to hear from all three of you, if you were to get a player or depend on one player to score you a winning pen to win you the grand final, who comes to mind, current or past A-League's player?
Oof. That's tough. I mean,
it's not that tough.
I think Berisha. I think in the big moments, I can't remember a single time he disappointed.
My head went straight to Mile Jedinak.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair.
Done.
Yep. He's never missed, right?
Don't think so.
Yeah.
Well, if he has, I've forgotten about it.
Hard to argue with a 100% record. I'd probably go Lafondra. I think he was always reliable. No fuss, used to belt it straight into wherever. Even slipped once and still scored, so I'd go with that. Yeah.
Well, speaking of Lafondra, his former club in Sydney, they're obviously going to be taking on the Jets in that semi. Now, in their Allianz Stadium semi last weekend, there was a couple of, celebrities. So I'm curious to hear from you guys. Who's the most famous person you've met through football?
For me, it was 2010 Socceroos. We were in South Africa. It was kind of just before the World Cup, and John Travolta came in on a helicopter into camp. Well, I have no reason why he was there, but he came as a big PR thing and we all got to meet him, and he was there for like an hour and mingled, took photos, and then he left on his helicopter. And I thought it was the most random experience ever, but awesome to meet someone like that.
So we had the discussion beforehand and you've just
I didn't
played against Neymar and you picked Travolta.
Yeah.
Who's more famous? Don't
open
that camera.
No one's going to understand that.
Yeah, no, they're not.
Vince?
Me, easy. And I didn't meet him. It was on Zoom at the start of this season. Pep Guardiola. Interview was amazing. It was like 1 a.m., 1:30 a.m. our time. I had to stay up. It was a battle. But you do it for the greats. And for him, it was, I've always wanted to interview him. It was what I thought it would be. I'd love to do it in person.
Do you say he's a big fan of you?
Amongst other things, yes. No, of course not. No, he didn't. Maybe next time.
One day. Well, hopefully Pep is watching this.
I've got no doubt in my mind.
Brosque, who comes to mind?
Yeah, look, I don't have a great memory at the best of times. I remember meeting the Prime Minister, and my memory's that bad, I don't know which one. So, and I don't know whether it'd be the most.
To be fair, there was a fair bit of changeover during your career, Brosque.
So, look, from a football sense, probably David Beckham. Played against him twice. And, again, if I don't remember them, they can't be that famous. So I'm going to say Beckham. Never
That's a pretty big one, though.
Mate, all we've learned with you on Total A-Leagues is you're really struggling to remember tackles.
I'm just glad you haven't brought up a red card of mine this week.
We ran out. There's only two.
That's next week.
Yeah, we'll find one for next week. Thank you, boys. Thank you, Nalene.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching. We'll catch you next week.